The other two introductory stories, and I again say that they are a segue into our last session on Nevi'im, the prophets. Yesterday, I drove to the drugstore, and as I'm about to get out, on the radio, I hear on a station that I don't usually listen to, Kol Chai, the broadcaster saying that he's about to call Yigal Amir's wife. Does everybody remember who Yigal Amir is? Mm-hmm. You know that we commemorated Yitzchak Rabin, Zichrono Livracha's, the anniversary of his death this week. And right. Yigal Amir was his assassin. And Yigal Amir has been in jail since that time.
Not long enough.
Now, why was he in the news? Not just because it's Rabin's site,
there she is.
But somebody needs, please, to go on mute. Yigal Amir has a son with his wife who is becoming bar mitzvah this Shabbat. And he had put in a plea to be able to attend. And there were debates about it. He is not being permitted to attend. And the news, on the radio, said that he was calling her, and when she picked up, just to wish her Mazal Tov and the son. I didn't trust that. I did not, because, you know, that's not a juicy story. And she proceeded to indicate that she's not surprised that he wasn't being permitted out, not because of what he did, but she knows this country and they've been against him since that event. And when he became bold enough to be explicitly clear with her and say, well, what he did was pretty awful, she said, but it was pikuach nefesh. Now, that means he did that to save the state of Israel's existence. Now, it could be that he believes that, she believes that, but that is not a reason to take anybody's life. You don't decide that. And here you had Yitzchak Rabin, even if you don't agree with him politically, that happens occasionally. He devoted his life to our people. So Yigal Amir represents something we've discussed over the last couple of weeks, is the dissonance between ritual and ethical behavior. For Yigal Amir is a man who davens 3 times a day. The second story, a little lighter, one of the women that's in my Thursday morning class, I actually mentioned this, her son-in-law was somebody that we mentioned a while ago, Micah Goodman, one of the young, brilliant thinkers of modern Israel right now, a writer, a teacher, and she told me that she wasn't there last Thursday and the Thursday before because of 2 grandchildren. One yesterday became bar mitzvah, and last week on Thursday, bat mitzvah. So when she was with us this morning, and I asked, how are you? She said, well, the truth is yesterday was pretty exciting because my grandson's celebration was on top of a roof of their building in Rehavia. and the police showed up. And well, all the bar mitzvah gift money is going to pay the 5,000 shekel fine. But she did say that the police were very friendly. Now I said, is that perhaps because your gathered guests were very cooperative? She said they were really just a few more than they should have been. They had their masks. But now, and this is why I'm telling you this, I said, tell me, was this grandchild one of Micah Goodman's children? And she said, no, no, no. His was the bat mitzvah last week, where every instruction that we are given was followed totally. There wasn't one extra person. Nobody was next to anybody. And even the refreshment was in little separate baggies. And why was I glad to hear that? Because here is somebody who was preaching being ethical, doing the right thing, and I wanted to be sure that I wasn't going to be crushed by him being hypocritical. I knew I took a chance when I asked that, but she immediately understood and said, no, absolutely not. So when we talk about Isaiah of the 8th century BCE, we're talking about somebody who was an inspiration behind eternal values, hopes, and dreams, and the source of several phrases and verses that you will be familiar with. Like Jeremiah, he confronted conflict between himself and the 4 kings who ruled during his time. Arrogant kings, as usual. And he confronted, like Jeremiah and other Nevi'im, Bnei Israel, the Israelites, going astray. And despite seeing half of his country vanquished and half subjugated, Isaiah, more perhaps than any other Navi, still dreamed. Interspersed between his dreams were his criticisms, and like all other Nevi'im, he had no tolerance whatsoever for, as I just mentioned, hypocrisy. I'm going to share our first text. Bring me no more vain oblations. If you don't understand oblations, the Hebrew is even easier than that. It's another word for offering, sacrifices. It is an offering of abomination unto me, new moon and Sabbath, the holding of convocations. I cannot endure iniquity along with the solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed seasons, my soul hateth. They are a burden unto me. I am weary to bear them. What God is having Isaiah say, as many Nevi'im have had to say, you're giving me korbanot, sacrifices, you're praying, you're observing Shabbat, Chagim, yet I don't want it because, as happens so often, you don't know how to treat each other. Your interpersonal bein adam l'chavero behavior is despicable. Now, specifically, there was such social class disparity in this period of time. And people with financial means were able to corrupt the leaders, which we know can easily happen. One small example of not caring for the needy, they had many, many vineyards. And the homes that they built next to the vineyards tended to go beyond the borders that they should have kept from their private home to another's private home. Now, why was that such a problem? Because usually there would be a vineyard and a home here, and then there would be this middle empty space, and then there would be another vineyard and another home. Well, if they took up that empty space, that meant that the homeless no longer had a place to stay. Just one small example of them not caring about lower classes. On the other hand, Shabbat, he points out, is very important, of immense value. And he says, if you keep it in the proper way, and if you are ethical, then of course, I want you to keep Shabbat. I'm just saying that if you are like Yigal Amir, then I'm not interested. And in fact, says, if you turn away thy foot because of the Sabbath from your routine, from pursuing your business on my holy day, and call the Shabbat a delight, oneg Shabbat, and the holy of the Lord honorable, and shalt honor it, not doing thy wanted ways, nor pursuing thy business, nor speaking thereof, then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will make you to ride upon the high places of the earth, and I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. So we see, on the one hand, if you're just going to keep ritual, I'm not interested. On the other hand, my genuine hope is that you are going to be both ethical and keep Shabbat. Now, what is so important? One of the reasons Shabbat is so important. Tell me, once you listen to the Kiddush that we say in the morning on Shabbat, which you might be familiar with. I'll just read it in the English. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Shabbat to the Lord. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger within your gates. So there, succinctly, we're told, doesn't matter what social class you're in. Doesn't matter. For those 25 hours of Shabbat, everyone is equal. Now you might say, well, what's the point of that if it's not throughout the week? The hope is that Shabbat will rub off on you, and the messages of Shabbat will rub off on you. So there's a sense of Shabbat not just being for God, and not just being for you, but for harmony between people. Now, Yeshayahu also talks, interestingly, about another potential for hypocrisy in fasting as well. Yoel bin Nun and Binyamin Lau, also two of today's great Israeli thinkers, write the following when discussing the book of Isaiah. A day of fasting and supplication can become the catalyst for change if undertaken correctly. One critical question is how the underprivileged will break their fast. I think this is marvelous. Will their hunger simply continue? If the wealthy undertake such a fast as an empty rite, while it is merely another dreary day for the despite, then God will not accept such a fast, nor the prayers and confessions that accompany it. You understand? He's saying if you're just fasting because that's a ritual and aren't thinking of, again, others who also might be fasting, but they, when the shofar is blown after Ne'ilah, are not going to be able to really eat too much, then why bother fasting? Again, mention of this dissonance between ritual and moral behavior. Now, the common denominator between fasting and keeping Shabbat is that both restored a sense of, anybody want to fill in the word?
Justice.
Justice. What else? What I just read from the Kiddush. We should all
Connection, Bracha?
connection,
Empathy.
empathy, but your
Holiness?
slave gets to rest. Your daughter gets to rest.
Continuity.
Equality, equality, equality. These are messages that come from the book of Isaiah. And what did I say? 8th century BCE. These are messages that we still need to heed and try to apply to life today. Now, we've seen Shabbat can be problematic if it's not genuine. On the other hand, it can be wonderful. During the time of Isaiah, there were a group of people, though, that when they heard Isaiah promoting Shabbat, they cried out to him desperately. Now, just a bit of history. When they were fighting their enemies, amongst them the Assyrians, they would be captured, and what you had was a population of Jewish eunuchs. They were castrated once captured in order to prevent these Jewish males from having relations with foreign queens or princesses that they were forced to serve. So they were no longer, when they returned, capable of bringing children into the world. So they cry out to Isaiah in frustration, lamenting the fact that they're missing family life. And Shabbat is very connected to family life and the opportunity for leaving a legacy. And so at this point, they're responding to Isaiah. Or Isaiah, I should say, is responding to their frustrations expressed. Thus saith the Lord, keep ye justice and do righteousness, for my salvation is near to come, and my favor to be revealed. Happy is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that holdeth fast by it, that keep the Shabbat from profaning it, and keep his hand from doing any evil. Neither let the alien that hath joined himself to the Lord, what that's referring to is that some of the neighbors who weren't part of Bnei Israel, the Israelites, like can happen today, would become attracted to the Jewish people, and they would join in joined himself to the Lord, speak, saying, the Lord will surely separate me from his people. But they were concerned God's not going to accept them. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree, because that's how they were feeling. I'm dying if I don't have somebody and something to continue beyond me. For thus saith the Lord concerning the eunuchs that keep my Shabbatot and choose the things that please me and hold fast by my covenant. Even unto them will I give in my house and within my walls a monument and a memorial better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting memorial that shall not be cut off. Now, this is so powerful. Look at the Hebrew, those of you who can. And what in verse 5, Pasuk Hey, what two words do you see that you're familiar with? It is a place that you have visited when you have come to Yerushalayim, and it is a place that is meant to do just what Isaiah is promising. You will have a legacy. Sorry?
Yad Vashem.
Yad Vashem. We know what Yad Vashem is. Now, it's interesting if you think about the name. Yad, we know is hand, but it also is the word for memorial. And what it's saying is, this is a memorial, and it's a way of remembering a name of someone. And it's been said that sometimes more than our children, depending on the family, that you'll be remembered by other people or other things. And so Isaiah is saying, don't fret. We will remember. We will remember you. Now, if you think about it, why do I find this so striking? We're going to see that some of what Isaiah is predicting has in fact come true. Even if it's something as specific as Yad Vashem for our day, that we've had this experience of confronting enemies, being destroyed partially. And then this happens again in our age of following the Shoah, and we being sure that we remember. So it is both messages that we've discussed with the example of the dissonance and lack of tolerance for hypocrisy. And that's the thrust of our session, plus the dreams, some of which are fulfilled already, and perhaps one or one and a half that still have to be. But be patient, we'll get to that. What else? As we continue. Also, the aliens that join themselves to the Lord, to minister unto him, and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants. Everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from profaning it and holding fast by my covenant. Even them will I bring to my holy mountain. Now he's talking about aliens to people that, again, were not part of our people, but somehow latched on. But he's also talking about people who were Jews, but assimilated. Now, this is very significant for then, but also for modern Israel. And this is why Isaiah is so important. The messages. These aliens, they have experienced another culture, but they are still part of our people. So I will not forget them. I will pray that they will hold fast by my covenant. And verse 7, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be acceptable upon mine altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Now, if you look at the Hebrew, Zion, I could call on, I know there's at least one choir member who could look. Olotehem. This is something we sing every Yamim Noraim. And Olotehem. This is from Yeshayahu, Isaiah. And then you will see the next time that you are able to be in your sanctuary, you will see Ki Veiti Beit Tfilah. That's what you have on the Aron Kodesh. Okay? But what's essential here is that God and Isaiah are saying, even those of you who have assimilated with the enemy's culture, and perhaps you're in between. Are you part of them? Are you part of us? And perhaps your yichus is questionable. I'm telling you, I'm going to bring you back. You are welcome. Anybody want to suggest why I am saying this is a modern issue too in Israel?
Bracha, I'm thinking of the million or so ex-Soviet Jews who didn't know where they stood.
Absolutely.
It's all in Natan's book.
Okay. Count on you, Stan. Of course, you would be thinking of that. And what other group have
The Ethiopians.
The Ethiopians. Okay. So you have people who perhaps their backgrounds have gotten mixed up, but there have been debates and awful arguments about this. But overall, there is a sense of you've come, you've served in the army, you're building our country. As long as you have one grandparent that is Jewish, you're part of us. These are all kinds of issues that have to be discussed, but they're here to help us build. Don't look perhaps at these little details, a discussion for another time. Again, I bring this telling you that it's looking at a text that is from so long ago, issues that we're still dealing with. Now, verse 8, saith the Lord God, who gathereth the dispersed of Israel, the remnant, yet I will gather others to him, besides those of him that are gathered. So, what do we have? What word do you see, the shoresh, 3 times in verse 8? That means gathering, group. Anybody?
Kabetz.
Kabetz, akabetz, linikbatzav. What words do you know built from that root?
Kibbutz.
Kibbutz. What's another word?
Futza.
Futsal.
And what is a 2-word phrase that has that word kibbutz in it that is being referred to here? When I will bring everybody together from the 4 corners of the word. earth. What is that called? Kibbutz
Galuyot.
Yafet. Kibbutz Galuyot, bringing together from the four corners of the diaspora. And it shall come to pass in that day, we're looking ahead now, that the Lord will set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people that shall remain from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamat and from the islands of the sea. And he will set up an ensign for the nations, V'nasa Nes, ensign, and will assemble the dispersed of Israel and gather together the scattered of Judah, Me'arba Kanfot Haaretz, from the four corners of the earth. Has this happened? There was a need again.
We're talking about Zionism through and through.
Okay? And this is a dream that has happened. It's still happening. It's still happening. And very interesting, I want us to look at just a bit of Megillat Atzmaut, which finds a basis in Yeshayahu, fulfilling Isaiah's vision. Eretz Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here, their spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. Here, they first attained to statehood, created cultural values of national and universal significance, and gave to the world the eternal book of books. The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for kibbutz galuyot, in gathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions. Now, I don't know exactly what everybody's thinking as you read this, but this is the goal. And I think we've done, if I was being asked about that on the Seker, pretty good. Every place is going to have its weaknesses, and we're working on it. It's a process. Why am I becoming defensive? I don't know. Now, 3, placing our trust in the rock of Israel. We'll get back to that. We affix our signatures to this proclamation at this session of the Provisional Council of State on the soil of the homeland in the city of Tel Aviv on the Sabbath Eve, the 5th day of ER 5708, the 14th of May, 1948. A dream come and coming true. Why does it say placing our trust in the rock of Israel? Anybody? And that is Tzur Yisrael. Okay, Ma'oz Tzur. Why? Anybody before I?
Is it because it includes those who maybe can't say God, and yet they are part of it? Is it that God supports them, but maybe is there an element of not believing for the atheists?
Okay, very good, Linda. There was a debate. Go on, somebody else?
I also think it indicates a permanence, that it's something that was, will be.
Okay.
I also think it might be,
Wait a minute, Frida, are you finished with your soup?
yeah, but I
Okay.
don't want you to see me.
Okay, go on.
I think it might be remembering where the first temple was.
Interesting.
Dome of the Rocks on it now.
Ah, okay.
I think it's attributing that Israel has strength. It's an adjective to make Israel be this strong place.
Okay, Shirley Ann.
Yeah,
All
Shirley
your
Ann, I was just going to
together.
say something like it. There's a permanence to a rock. It's
Okay.
strong and it's set and it's sort of echoing Shirley Ann.
Okay. However, what you just said, Shirley Ann, was the cause of heated debate because you said that Israel is the rock. This rock of Israel is a compromise because it is one of the names of God. And we will see in Yeshayahu, you shall have a song as in the night when a feast is hallowed, and gladness of heart as when one goeth with the pipe to come into the mountain of the Lord, to the rock of Israel. That is referring to God. We know he has 70 names. There, of course, each name is symbolic of something. And what you said, all of you, about permanence and strength, of course. But what Linda began with in saying, there are those that were signing this declaration that were not sensing that God, I'm going to use, God had a hand in it. They don't look at it as a miracle, but that, yes, the people of Israel, the Sabras, and those who came from Europe and fought in the underground armies and then in the army, they are the ones that have rebuilt the country. So this was a compromise. Instead of saying God, Adonai, which had that religious tone, but still to refer, because people who are comfortable with God know that Sur Yisrael is referring to God. So we see the compromise. Again, an indication of so much of what is written and is discussed goes back to the time of our prophets and our Nevi'im and our text. Even the popular songs, so many of them are based on our sources. Even with, I don't know, I think Linda said atheists, but I'm talking about even, it doesn't have to be, even the Chiloni. This is part of our culture. And that's why even in, how do you say, a mamlachti school, a government school that is not dati, they learn Torah, Tanakh, as history. And when you're learning that, there's no way that certain values can also be imparted. Now, as I said, Yeshayahu is the visionary that saw that someday there will be this scene that we're all familiar with. And the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. It's a vision that we are familiar with, and we are still waiting for that to happen. There are bits and tastes of elements of shalom, and we'd love to believe that what's happened in the last month or so, today the news says how there will now be direct flight from Emirates. It can't be bad. It can't be bad. But what's interesting is I want us to understand fully this idea of in God's hands or in our hands comes up, interestingly, with one of Isaiah's disciples, Micah. And he here gives his interpretation of what we just read by Isaiah. And this shall be peace. He's now going to talk about how he sees peace is going to come about. And this shall be peace. When the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princes among men. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod with the keen-edged sword, and he shall deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our border. And the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples, as dew from the Lord, as showers upon the grass, that are not looked for from man, nor awaited at the hands of the sons of men. And the remnant of Jacob, look at this very carefully now, and the remnant of Jacob shall be among the nations, in the midst of many peoples, as a lion among the beasts of the forests, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who if he go through treadeth down and teareth in pieces, there is none to deliver. What is Micah describing as opposed to Isaiah? They see that lion in very different ways.
Yep.
Anyone?
War.
Okay.
Internal disarray.
No, not
Okay.
internal, it's external.
But
Gladys, go on.
It's sorry, but my brain is not working.
No, it is, because you just said something, which was right on.
It's aggression. It's
Okay,
but it comes from within as
okay.
well as from
Now,
without.
yeah.
there is for sure, when there are internal problems, that's going to lead to how you are facing the external. But in this case, what's interesting, and we're talking about Micah as being a disciple of Isaiah. He's a prophet, and he believes, but he believes things are going to happen a little differently than the way Isaiah sees it. And this is very, very basic to approaches of how we live our lives. Isaiah believed that the lion is God. Micah felt that the lion is a human king. Isaiah felt that Judah, the country, were helpless, whereas Micah is willing to say, we are the predators. And he's saying that we need to be the ones who are going, when we go amongst the people, to be, I think you just said, aggressive. Now, both of them have the same goal in sight. But Micah still believes that this can happen, the geula, the redemption, through the natural order of things. Isaiah is giving God more significance as the key player. And as hopeful as Isaiah is, and as caring as he is for his people, he doesn't expect all that much from monarchy and people who are leaders. And in fact, said any leader elsewhere, any leader should only be a leader for a limited amount of time. She must be under scrutiny and replaced after a certain amount of time. Why? To lessen the potential for corruption. Now, I've said in other incidents that some of what Isaiah is saying applies to today too. What I just said now, I'm sure, has nothing to do with anything of today, for sure, anywhere in the world. But there was logic in what they were saying. Now, interesting, why did the two have these different approaches? It suggested it's based on their diverse backgrounds. Interesting. Isaiah was part of Jerusalem royalty, and he lived near the palace growing up. And therefore, that would explain, it suggested, his despair about royalty and kings. On the other hand, Micah grew up in a rural setting outside Jerusalem, far removed from the harsh realities of royal life. And so he still probably found it easier to believe in the glory of the house of David, of the monarchy. And I think that's a human psychological phenomenon, that depending on where you come from and your past experiences, that will impact on how you're going to see things and what level of faith you're going to have in people or in God. It makes sense. It makes sense. Now, harmony, as Isaiah continues to dream of the end of days. And it shall come to pass in the end of days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as at the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. A day, we've talked about harmony that Shabbat should bring. Well, eventually there will be harmony between Kol HaGoyim. You know, it's only in later years that the word goy, which means nation, we were a goy, but it became meaning a Gentile. But all of them one day will come together. And many people shall go and say, come ye and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. And what is this next line? Ki mitzion tetzei Torah udvar Adonai Yerushalayim. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. We hope that there are words that are coming out of Zion. And there are. And by doing that, we are fulfilling most of the time the vision of us being an or lagoyim, a light unto the nations. And nations shall walk at your light, and kings at the brightness of thy rising. We tried. Again, that's on our conscience. And I think that's why it hurts so much when we feel that we've done something embarrassing. But every people should be doing that kind of self-evaluation. But it's a process. It's a process. And still a dream is, and he shall judge between the nations and shall decide for many peoples. And we all know this. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, v'lo yilmedu od milchama. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. A dream that in part has been making its way into the world, although there's such a long way to go. But the appendix to this verse was written, probably about over 20 years ago by one of Israel's national poets, who himself was a Chiloni, but again, an example of somebody who built on the text from the Tanakh. And it's a beautiful appendix written by Yehuda Amichai. Don't stop after beating the swords into plowshares. Don't stop. Go on beating and make musical instruments out of them. Whoever wants to make war again will have to turn them into plowshares first. I just find that to be incredibly beautiful. And we pray, I think I could end it with just those words. We pray so much, but that Isaiah's vision is still spoken about, studied, and we keep striving. We keep striving. May it be. Bimhera bi'amenu.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Main Sela.
Amen Selah. Amen Selah. I would close, just to conclude this series. Our prophets aren't just brave because they're willing to stand alone, but some of them, and I'm saying this because of the Parshat HaShavua this week, Vayera. Avram was maybe our first Navi prophet. Tell me 3 things about Avram. Just shout out something that comes to your mind.
Welcoming strangers.
Welcoming strangers. Go on.
Searching for
Akedat Yitzchak.
justice.
Akedat Yitzchak. Somebody else said something else.
Searching for justice.
Exactly. Okay?
Selfless.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that at another time. There are things that Avram also did that were not so wonderful. However, he's human. Why do I bring him up now when I want to conclude about Nevi'im?
He was the first.
He, not just first, but I think what Marlene mentioned, you remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you read that, you would say Avram had perhaps borderline sacrilegious behavior toward God. Here, God, wanting to make him a partner, says to him, I'm about to destroy this city because they are so horrific. And can you imagine God telling you that? And you just saying, hold on, God, you really are going to kill innocent people? You're going to question God? And he doesn't just do that once, but he does it twice. Now, you don't see that God gets angry with Avram for doing that. It's like a parent who has taught her child a certain value. And then the child sees, you're not doing what you taught me. And so you're, as long as she says it or he says it in a respectful way, you're going to feel good about that. Because you're going to say to yourself, you've internalized what I have imparted to you. Thank God that we have people like Avram and the Nevi'im, and we've just briefly touched. You can spend a year on each of the prophets to get a taste of their determination to make the best of us, which means sometimes teaching. I was going to say criticizing, and yes, sometimes, but constructively, but all out of love for two phenomena. For the way that Sur Yisrael wants us to be, I'm just doing that to be dramatic, and for the people. Because ultimately a Navi who stuck with it had to love his people to put up with all that we know our congregations can do and our people can do. So I take us back to, do not forget, though the series is finished, that I expect us to remember that we are all B'nai Nevi'im. And please stay well. And I'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.